Hello, my name's Dave Dawes, and what we're doing is we're doing a short interview with Mike Travis, who's the current council member, just to really ask me some questions and talk about my thoughts on the RCN and council and the issues facing nursing. So off you go, Mike, who's sort of hidden behind the camera, you can't see him.
Well, Dave, you're standing again. Why?
Why am I standing for council? I think deep down, I think the RCN does a lot of really good stuff and provides a lot of really good services, but I think it could do a bit more, and I think it could provide better services for members, and there's stuff that I'm really passionate about, and I'd like to see the RCN do more of that. I think particularly around two areas. I think the independent sector, I think a lot of the focus is on the NHS, which is understandable, but there's a lot of members in the independent sector, and I think we need to kind of look more at what their issues are and what their needs are. And secondly, I think we could just engage a lot better with members on a day-to-day basis. I think there's too many people for whom they pay the RCN subs, it's there if you get in trouble, but for the rest of the time they're not really engaged. And they don't really want to go to branch meetings, they don't really want to go to big formal events, but they want some way in which their voices can be heard, they can engage with policy making, they can be asked questions about what's going on in the practice, and they could feel more like the RCN is their organisation.
Okay, Dave, you picked up a really interesting point there about the independent sector. But the independent sector is notoriously difficult to organise in terms of industrial relations. And if you don't have that industrial relations foothold, how do you engage in this very diverse and widespread workforce and membership?
I would totally agree. I think there are two big challenges for the independent sector. I think one is the industrial relations side, and the second thing is around patient safety and quality of care. So in the Northwest, I chair the Independent Sector Network. So as part of my board role, I also try and pull together independent sectors from across the region. And the industrial relations problem is basically for small organisations, they don't have stewards, they don't really have safety reps, they don't have someone they can go to when they're in difficulty. And most of our structure is around the NHS. That's something I think we could change. I don't think we're going to be able to do it overnight, but I think we need to look at more radical options, particularly around stewards. So why can't we have stewards who maybe cover a number of different organisations, even if we don't necessarily legally call them stewards, but you can turn to. So if you're in a small nursing home, there is someone you can pick up the phone to who can give you support in disciplinaries, in grievances, in being your voice. I think the second one is raising standards of care. I mean, the Francis report mid-staff showed that there are big problems in the NHS where staff don't feel safe to speak out about care. It's getting a bit better, but we know that's a really big issue in the independent sector. People are seeing really poor standards of care in certain pockets, and they don't really feel supported about doing anything about it.
Hey, Dave,
Yeah.
you mentioned the industrial relations in the independent sector.
Yeah.
And the independent sector is notoriously difficult to organise, as I've said. And yet, the present government has said that if nurses don't earn £35,000 a year after 6 years of being in this country, they'll be deported.
Yeah.
Now, this is a big issue because the pay structures are not designed to spend, especially in the independent sector, to help people to earn 35k.
Yeah.
How would you deal with that with your background in the independent sector?
Okay, well, I mean, firstly, I think it's an outrageous government decision, and I think the RCN, in combination with other unions and other Royal Colleges, needs to lobby really, really hard about that. I spoke about that at Congress last year, and made a very impassioned speech about why it's the wrong policy, and it's driven by some far-right kind of UKIP challenging people within the government, and I think we really need to nail it in the head. I think quite apart from the social justice side of it, that the NHS and the independent sector in the country as a whole can't afford to lose overseas nurses, to me it's also around diversity, because the people that tend to be hit much hardest are women, predominantly women, from a BME background. And there's a lot of people for whom the independent sector tends to be how you get into healthcare in the UK. And if those people are being treated really badly, it affects the diversity of the whole workforce. And it's people who have got the quietest voice, who are not well supported, who are getting a really, really bad deal. So I think we need to lobby the government hard. I think we need to be really on the offensive when you get what are, to be honest, fairly racist articles about overseas nurses, saying that they're valued, this is a stupid policy, and basically we need every nurse and healthcare assistant we can get in the UK. There is not an abundance of nursing and HCA talent. We need to get everyone we can, and we need to keep them.
Well, Dave, I mean, it's always interesting to hear people's opinions, but what would be your 3 top values that you would personally bring to council on behalf of the membership?
Oh, that's a good question. I think 3 of the most important values to me personally, I'd probably say are around courage, around integrity, and around creativity. And in terms of courage, I've been a whistleblower in organisations. I know what that's like. I've actually challenged the RCN. I actually took the Royal College of Nursing to the Trade Union Certification Officer because I felt that some of what they were doing was unjust in terms of governance. So I'm not afraid of standing up when I think it's right, even if it causes me a lot of hassle personally. Courage is big, important to me. And integrity, I kind of stick with what I say. I stick with my values, even if they're unpopular, even if I'm the only person in a room who thinks that, I will say it and I'll speak my mind and I'll fight that corner. And finally, I think creativity. I think a lot of the time we're learning as an organisation from the wrong organisations. Sometimes we try and model ourselves on big NHS trusts or big charities, whereas there's some really interesting community organisations, there's some really interesting technology organisations, there's some really interesting humanitarian organisations operating worldwide who are doing really interesting things that I think we could learn from. So I like to take ideas from outside the NHS, outside the UK, and go, how can we use new ideas and be open to new ideas and creative ideas to take forward the agenda for nurses and nursing?